Thank you, Danielle, and thank you all for being here. Again, it's so lovely outside, and you're spending it inside with us, but we're grateful for it. So I'm going to start, because we only have 50 minutes, and that's going to go really quickly. I will start with the author bios, and just a quick bio for me, like one line. I was going to read a whole summary of the author's books, but that will take a lot of time, so I will just ask them really briefly to give like a one-sentence summary of the books that we're going to be discussing, so we can jump right in. Sounds good? Yes, brilliant. Okay, so we shall begin with Santiago H. Amigorena. Santiago is a French-Argentine director, screenwriter, producer, and author. He has written 14 novels, which have been translated into more than 20 languages. Santiago has also worked as a scriptwriter on over 30 feature films. His directorial debut, A Few Days in September, was featured in the official selection of the Venice Film Festival and the Toronto Film Festival, and it was distributed worldwide. Oh, props. His second film, Another Silence, was also shown at Venice Film Festival in 2011, and his third film, Les Enfants Rouges, was presented in festivals in Rio and Beirut. The Ghetto Within, translated by Frank Wynne, HarperCollins, is Santiago's US debut and his first to be translated in English. It was shortlisted for several prestigious literary awards in France and won the Prix des Libraires de Nancy. Yay! Okay. And Jonas Hassen Khemiri is the author of 6 novels, 7 plays, and a collection of short stories and essays. The Family Clause was a finalist for the National Book Award for Translated Literature and received the Prix Medi Étranger, my God, I'm forgetting my French, in France. His play Invasion earned an OB award for Best Script. Khemiri has been a finalist for Sweden's most prestigious literary prize 3 times, winning it once. A recipient of the Cullman Fellowship at the New York Public Library, Khemiri's writing has appeared in the New York Times, The New Yorker, and elsewhere. His newest novel, The Sisters, is his first book written in English, and it's actually also a finalist. It's been longlisted for the National Book Award just last week, and he lives in Brooklyn with his family and teaches creative writing at NYU. Woo! And Madeleine Thien is the author of 4 books, including Do Not Say We Have Nothing, which was shortlisted for the Booker Prize, and most recently the Book of Records. The Book of Records. Her work has appeared in the New Yorker, Granta, the New York Review of Books, and elsewhere. And it was actually the Book of Records was selected by Obama this summer for one of his favorite books, and she lives in Montreal, where she's just returned from. So thank you for being here, Maddie. And I am your moderator, Dr. Camille U. Adams, and I am the author of How to Be Unmothered, a Trinidadian Memoir that will be available for sale and signing hereafter as well. I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. And that's it. So we're all international. So thank you for being here with us. And I'm just going to launch right in after asking them to do a 1-sentence spiel about the books that we're about to discuss today. Is that right? Yeah.
Okay, 1 sentence. The Book of Records is set in an enclave where different centuries wash in like the sea, and it's about a girl and her father, a girl who only has 3 books for 7 years, about Hannah Arendt, Spinoza, and the Chinese poet Du Fu.
No pressure.
I wrote a book. My book is about a man, not an old man, who lives in Buenos Aires and gets letters from his mother who stayed in Warsaw in the ghetto during the Second World War, and he decides not to speak anymore. And that man was my grandfather.
So The Sisters is a story about 3 sisters who are trying to escape a curse.
That was the most succinct thing ever.
It's also 600 pages long, I should say that. To just scare you at the outset. Yeah, so it's a very long book about 3 sisters trying to escape a curse. I've always been fascinated with curses ever since someone I loved put a curse on me. So that made me want to write a long book about trying to escape one.
Perfect, thank you. That was the most perfect segue, because I'm about to ask you all that. So, we're going to start at the beginning. I'm starting with the exigence, the birthplace of these books, where they were conceived, and so I'm going to give a brief intro. So, in talking about the birthing of these books, Jonas, in The 3 Sisters, The sisters themselves believe themselves to be cursed to lose everything they love. It's what their mother convinced them of after losing her husband and their father, and it's a belief that she implants within them as well. Thus, as adults, these sisters genuinely fear losing partners, people, positions, possessions they love. And in a New York Times article, it said that you personally believe that you've been hexed, as you just mentioned. But I also read that you believe that after you'd been married as well and lost someone, so you thought that was the fulfillment of the curse too. Did I read that correctly? Okay, good. And Santiago, you've said of your ongoing writing that you write to oppose the silence that has stifled you since birth. And Maddie, having been born in Canada to Chinese parents, you're fascinated by the relationship of memory to history and by the cross-pollination of separate cultures and writers. And so I'm going to ask you all if you can speak to how you conceived of these books or how the books came to you, the exigence really, like the issue that you're striving to grapple with in terms of the micro, the personal, the interior, and the macro. How are these books speaking to that? There are like any many. Yeah, do you wish to start? Yeah, thank you.
I think the beginning for me was around the time my mom had passed away. And louder? Yes, sorry. I'll speak directly into I told myself I wanted to write a novel set in a building made of time. And I didn't know what that meant. And it took 20 years to think about how space and time could be concretized in that way in a novel.
Yeah.
That was the beginning.
Yeah. And so that's for you, like you're investigating time. How do you imagine that that's speaking to this particular time or the way in which like it's, the way that's speaking to this time?
I think it became a novel about the longing for an education. And about about ethics in a time of political and environmental catastrophe, and about maybe the models we seek in the lives of others, but we also have to find in our own way those core things that will make us able to live in the world that we're born into.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
Well, it started clearly with the letters of my great-grandmother. But I think that, well, before writing this book, I wrote about 10 or 11 books about my own silence. And I always knew that I had to write something about my grandfather's silence. I think what really made me start writing is that I ask myself how, in which way you can inherit silence. You know, it's very easy to inherit many other things, words, money, or whatever. But silence is very strange because he never talked to me about his silence, obviously. And I guess I understood that what I had been doing for like 30 years before writing this book was only trying to put words on my silence. I mean, I'm not surprised that your book is very long. When silence is involved, you have to write a lot, even if you are looking for something that you know you will never find.
Yeah. Was it you probing his silence, or did you feel as if you had become silent as well? Like you were striving to find your own and plunder that?
Don't worry, I never answer questions. I will say something else. But
Okay.
No, I'm joking. The thing is that for his silence, I needed to make more fiction. You know, because my grandfather died when I was 7 years old, so I never experienced being alive with him, you know, near him, obviously not during the Second World War. And I knew that I had to find like other ways to speak about silence. It will not be just telling about me suffering in front of silence. And maybe I understood something about the fact that when you say I suffer, there is less suffering than when you say he's suffering. You know, when you create a character for certain things, not all, but I think for suffering, it becomes more strong. So
Yeah, thank you. It's beautiful. Jonas?
Yeah, I mean, it's such an interesting question to start there because, I mean, we're all writers. We know what it's like to finish a project and then sit down and start the new one. And for me, that silence is always terrifying, that silence in between projects. So I've done my best to conquer it and to survive it, or to just trick myself to keep going, to trick myself that silence isn't real. But I know, I mean, I have written a number of novels, and after every novel, I have that feeling of void, and I, go crazy, and I start Googling how to write a novel in 30 days. And I think that I need to learn it again. I need to learn it anew. So there's something about silence that I think, I mean, I'm not going to speak for us collectively, even though that would be fun, because this is talk about silence. We, as authors, I think one of the reasons why we became fascinated with language is that we have been afraid of silence, or that we've felt that there were parts of us that we couldn't share in public.
Yeah.
At least that has been my experience. One version of me is here, but there is another version of me that you will never see. And I will put them in my books again and again and again and again. So part of that silence is like, in this particular book, I remember just having a chatter in my head that I couldn't understand, because I'm a Swedish writer. I was born and raised in Sweden, and a lot of my books start with chattering, like I hear my characters speaking. And the weird thing about this particular book was that they were speaking in English, and I couldn't figure out why. So then I thought, that's weird, but I'm going to just allow you to speak in English for a few chapters, maybe 10, 20. Maybe 650 pages of chatter. So I wrote the whole book in English just because I chose to trust whatever was going on in my head. And it was the most enjoyable writing experience I've ever had. And part of that, I think, is because I let go. And it's scary to let go. It's so much easier to control things. Speaking of silence, like when I heard about this, that we were going to talk about silence, the immediate first thought I had was a Swedish expression that we have in my home country, and in Swedish is tala är silver, men tiga är guld. And it makes no sense for you, so I'm going to translate it, and I can say whatever you want, whatever I want, because you will never know if I speak the truth.
No, we'll Google it after.
So, tala är silver. It means speaking is silver. And that's awesome, right? Silver is great. But staying silent is gold. And I remember growing up and thinking, I don't like that. I really don't like that. I don't think that's true. No. But I do think that there are moments when silence can be subversive and really impactful, and maybe we can talk about that too. Yeah. So with this particular book, it started with the voices of these sisters. I followed them for a few years, and ultimately it became a book about these sisters' relentless attempt to escape a curse, even though they're not completely convinced that curse is true.
But they do return to it when misfortune visits them. It's in the back of their heads, right? They're like, oh, this is because, like, when Ina becomes really afraid that she's going to lose this relationship, she believes it is the curse. Yeah. And so I am concerned about the ways in which, like, you can have this silence, that silence externally, it's something that you don't express. As you said, like writers, we're obsessed with putting the parts of ourselves that we can't talk about into the books because it's a vulnerable way of revealing, but there's so much loud chatter in our heads, right? And so it's a way of making sense of that. So I'm segueing into our other question because you're talking about revealing that which you hadn't before, and the fact that this book asked you to write it in English, and you were resistant at first, and then it made you move to New York, and we'll get to that thereafter. But I'm wondering, for whom are you all writing? Who is your primary, secondary, and tertiary audience? And I'm going to ask that we don't do the writer cop-out of, yes, I'm just writing for myself, which we are, right? Essentially, making sense of our lives and sort of like reintegrating things that we don't want to think about, you know, like creating some sort of narrative that gives us some meaning. But who are we striving to write to externally as well? So who are these stories for?
I have a thing that I do at times when I think of a new project, because I have many failed projects. If I think of a contemporary writer whose work I admire and think that they could write the book that I'm working on, and that would feel okay, I'm letting it go. Then I'm not the right person for that book. That's kind of a test I do.
Although you know that you would write it differently.
Yeah, but if with every book that I've written, I've had if I just imagine a writer I love who would write that particular book, if let's say Toni Morrison wrote The Sisters. No, but like if we imagine that situation, it would be if I have a project where I feel like I'm the only one who can write it, that's normally a good sign. Yeah.
Well, you were the only one who could write this one because you write a meta-fictive version of yourself into the book, who is also has the same family background, the same history, the same racial dichotomy, and so you have that person also trying to puzzle it out. And so are you writing back home, right, because you wrote this in English, are you writing back to Swedish people, are you writing to biracial people, are you writing to people who felt peripheralized or marginalized in some way, are you writing to people who have also felt like they've been cursed, to whom, because it has been awarded, and really, that's so wonderful. To whom do you want someone to pick this up and be like, yes, I've been waiting for this. This is for me.
That's a great question. I think I'm writing for people who, if I'm going to be specific and not do a cop-out of, like, I'm writing for a younger version of myself, which is also probably true. But I think I write for people who have had the experience of what it's to feel the consequences of not being included in the world. So like people who have spent a long time wondering why they feel almost at home. I think that's my because I've done that.
Yes.
I've spent a lot of my a lot of my hours awake just wondering why I feel like 94% at home, or 74, or 24. Often in Stockholm, 10. So I think that's my ideal reader in some sense. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I tend to push. I'm a memoir writer, so I always want the very personal. Santiago, who are you writing
I
to?
know exactly who I write for. I write for a few writers, but I keep sending my books to them, and
Really?
they never answer. I mean. Those writers are like many writers. I write for Proust, for Joyce, for Mallarmé, for Leopardi, I don't know. They never read my books. There's no way. And I think it's when you have read a little bit, like all here, writers, known writers, you know that the best readers are all dead. So it's very complicated to find.
You sit in a book festival and you say all the best writers dead?
You think we can compare ourselves with Proust and Joyce and museum?
I think that there are other canons and we don't all write in the Western one. And so, yes, we absolutely can, because there's brilliance globally and in other tongues and in other traditions. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I think there are a few writers in the past that gave so much themselves to writing and reading, and I'm not sure it's possible to do that now.
Oh.
I think, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know everybody here, sorry. Yeah?
We'll get to that. I'm interested in that. Like, why can't we? Is it because of contemporary demands on our time? Is it because we don't have the same literary traditions, the same outlets?
Yes, well, I think life changed. Even Borges. He died in '86, so he's not so. I had him on the phone, so he's not that old. But he could read all day long since he was blind, but like 14 hours a day without thinking about anything else.
Yeah.
That is one thing that changed. And also we read much more new books. So obviously we don't have time to read all the books that we should have read before reading those new books. So it's a different quality of reading. Yeah, I think so. I'm
Sadly, yeah. Maddie, to whom are you writing?
It's such a great question, and I think actually when I'm writing, I feel like I'm with a reader who is far. I imagine this incredibly generous reader, this reader who knows far more than I do, this reader who actually kind of gives me some kind of courage to keep. I always feel when I'm writing a book that I'm the one who understands it the least. The characters understand it, the world understands itself. There's a reader who has already received the book in some way. Yeah. And it just takes me a really long time to catch up with them. And that's the reader I imagine. And I feel like I need that generous, wise reader to help me and not give up.
I think that's so lovely. And it shows in your prose, you're never didactic and sort of spelling things out. There's a lot in the white spaces that you leave for the reader, and there's a respect for the reader's intelligence that I think shows. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so I'm going to ask you all a craft question, because we're all here for silence and stories, and so I want to talk about the way that we've actually created that silence. And so we've talked about the silence that has lived in you all, like innately, that you're striving to answer, and I want to talk about the silence on the page. And so Maddie, from chapter 3 onward, we get subplots with varying characters, and their chapters center entirely around them, right? So the 3 books that Maddie mentioned before that Lena has from the ages of 7 to 14 are with Hannah, Espinosa, and Defoe, right? These are our writers and philosophers. And you have these chapters tell their stories to Lena as she's in the building, the sea, which is a construct of time. And these chapters almost serve as vignettes. They're narratives in of themselves, and they're like distinct rooms in the building. And the POV, the setting, the voice, the arc, all of it shifts entirely. And so it's sort of like this, it's like Inception, if you've ever seen the movie. It's like a story within a story within a story, which is really beautifully crafted. And I want to talk about the ways in which that fracturing speaks to the decisions that you're striving to make in order to showcase something. I'll get to it. Santiago, you make really powerful use of pathos when you write about Vicence's years of receiving his mother's letters. Can I tell you that that first part really made me tear up, actually? Like, she's sending all of these letters and she's begging to have a reply from her son, and you number the years in which, and so the reader isn't able to bypass that. We can't bypass her words because you actually quote the letters, and you can't bypass the number of years that he has ignored her, although he's suffering all of this regret right now. And it's so painful because you can hear this despair, and you make us feel that despair as well, and that was really well done. And so he has this opportunity to get her out of Poland, and he doesn't. And so we're seeing him doing the self-flagellation of like pain and guilt thereafter. And Jonas, you make use of interesting and engaging metafiction, which I mentioned before, where you're writing a character with your real name and racial heritage. And you have this character who is sort of obsessed with the sisters, is it fair to say that? And he's really captivated by them. And he's guiding us through the story. So we're getting to see the sisters through their own perspectives and then through this lens. And it's a bit of a mystery. So I'm going to ask you all, can you speak to the craft choices that each of you made in inventing or innovating form, and how the content influenced the form and how the form impacted the content? Because I feel like there's a measure of invention in all of these works. And so I'm wondering, to what end, what is that serving in these writings, in these books? Does that make sense? Yes.
Too complicated for me.
Okay.
I'll try to. Well, I never think before, about, I write every day. I wake up and I write. And I never think, there is no will in the way that I will write something.
Yeah.
So I think I can't separate in my head the form and the story or the characters. It's clear that for me there is always silence in the words. There is no language without silence. So sometimes you find small ways to make the reader feel a little bit more the language.
Yeah.
But I go back to the last question, the one before the reader. What's very beautiful what you said about the reader. It's true that we always write for the reader to work, not to just read and
Yes.
and feel exactly the same that the other readers. You write for one reader who will read. Always a new thing that you haven't written. So. Mm-hmm. The writing is not, there is nothing clear. It must keep on living after you put the words on the paper. So for that, there is no something like you can really think before and say, okay, this will be the book, in my case.
Yeah, and I think that it showcases that, right? You're sort of refuting silence by having, although we know that she does die, obviously, right? We are having her presence is so strong on the page. And so I agree that it doesn't seem very formulaic, it just seems really natural and heartfelt. And it makes us feel it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so actually, we're just, by coincidence, the class so I'm teaching at NYU in the MFA program, and we had a class on silence on Tuesday. So I'm going to give you a 4-hour lecture now about silence. No, but I've been spending a lot of time thinking about silence. And I don't assign my own work, which would be very strange as a professor. But for this particular class, we were focusing on silence and what we can remove from our text to create tension. And I find that to be really fascinating, because I remember when I was a young writer, I thought building an interesting character was all about adding. I'm going to write a portrait of this person, and if I can just nail it by describing them from top to toe. I was filling out these forms. Have you seen these forms about characters? Like shoe size, hair color. And I thought that was me getting to know them. And I realized that the more I told the reader about my characters, the less the reader cared. So I started removing things instead. And I would choose 1 or 2 specific details about a character. And all of a sudden, they would come to life. And it's linked to what Santiago said, that all of a sudden, we as readers start leaning in. And the writers I love, they do that. They establish a distance in a way between, not distance, we're not looking for distance, we're looking for proximity. And proximity comes from the fact that the reader is actually showing me that they trust me. As a reader. And I find that in both Santiago's and Maddie's work, that there is not at all distance, it's proximity by trust. I have to lean in to see why this particular character is important. And in the class, we read a beautiful play by Carol Churchill called Far Away, and we read a Swedish writer called Stig Dagerman, a short story called To Kill a Child. And these 2 very short texts, they deal with, from a craft perspective, deal with silence in very different ways. Okay. So in Far Away, Carol Churchill basically uses something unspoken as fuel in the story. And it's remarkably effective. The fact that two people are kind of arguing about what happened, and as a reader, you kind of go, I really want to know what happens. What is the actual truth? And it's just back and forth between like a young girl and her aunt. Pop, 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 pop. But gradually we see that the young girl who seems innocent in the beginning is almost like baiting her aunt to, like trapping her in a lie. It's just beautiful. So that's one way of approaching silence. You can remove a secret, you could create a secret. And I think that's related to the sisters also.
Yeah.
They believe in this curse, so we believe in it, even though they only kind of believe in it. You know, that the way that we believe in bedtime stories, we kind of like, oh, it's just a story, and then we cry. It's just a story, but then we are terrified of it. So to be able to say, it's just a story, but it still changed my life forever.
Yes.
To be truthful enough to include both of those truths, I guess, in the fiction is what I'm aiming for. And Dogerman does something completely different. In this text, he basically looks the reader in the eye and says, I'm going to write a text and I'm going to kill the child at the end. This child is going to die. And it's haunting. It's terrible. And you kind of go, but there's no tension there. There's no narrative fuel because the secret is not, there is no secret. But then what happens when he says that? This child will die. You kind of go, I wonder how. Not that you want to see it, but you lean in because you want to, instead of the what, you want to know the how. And what he does instead is just an interesting technique that if we have some writers in the room that you can practice, he does this thing where we approach the climax of his story. It's a story where a young child is killed in a car accident. And he wrote it in order to kind of make people drive slower in the 1950s in Sweden. And it works. To this day, whenever I speed, I kind of think of that story and I'm still speeding, but I guess I notice, no, I guess I speed a little bit less thanks to this story. But then what he does with the car crash in the story, he removes the actual narrative peak emotion in the story. He removes that. And that's a completely different way of structuring the story. Basically saying, I'm going to tell you exactly what will happen, but I will remove the thing that you think you will receive towards the end. So it's just two very different ways of incorporating stories in your silences in your stories, and both are kind of work beautifully. But the main thing is to think about what you can remove rather than what you can add.
And in yours, we have that removal because we follow for nearly 700 pages to find out how this case is operative, why this young Jonas is obsessed with them, why they need to travel to New York. Was it really their grandfather who actually helped with building the Rockefeller Center? And so we have those stakes because I feel as if we believe in it as well. Like it's giving us permission to think about our own lives in ways in which we feel as if we might be operating under a curse. And so the tension therein is that resonance like, okay, let's see if it's actually true. And you maintain that till the end, which is, well done for 700 pages. So.
Yeah, and the key here is separating emotional truth from factual truth, right?
Yeah.
So is it factually true that their great-grandfather built Rockefeller Center by himself?
Maybe not.
Is it factually true? But if it influences their whole lives, maybe it's emotionally true, and then maybe we care as readers.
But also, what are they using that to hide from? Because we don't get so much of the mother. Talking about removal of characters, she is this vague character who some of the younger children in Sweden believe that she may actually be a sex worker, or that she's abandoned them, or the father has died in some mysterious circumstance and all of that. We do know that there is some mental health issue, but we don't really see her on the page. And so she operates like this ghost. She's haunting these sisters as well. And so we're striving to figure out what is her role. And so it's trying to locate this slippery understanding of a curse, which is really intriguing. Yeah. And speaks to that sort of like ghost-like figure in Santiago's work as well, and in Maddie's, where we're not entirely sure what the building is. It opens with the sea, and we're not understanding that it is a construct of time. And if it is, then like how does that actually work? And so I want to get to that, to plunder that idea of the silence that we have in these works. and the way that they've been constructed. And I want to think about it, and I will be honest to say this is a personal obsession of mine, so I'm just going to use this time to get you all to think about it. This idea of displacement and dislocation and being in the wrong place. And I am invoking you all as authors as well, because for all of you in writing your work, you found yourself, and tell me if I'm wrong, displaced to some extent. Jonas, you said that sister started speaking to you in English. You had to get the Cullman Center Fellowship in order to come to New York to be able to finish writing that. Santiago, you yourself started off living in Argentina and then had the war and having to move to Europe, which was sort of like you being exiled from home, which is sort of charting what happened with your grandfather, right? Where he's exiled from Europe and considering that sense of not being in a place in which you really think you ought to be writing. And then Maddie, your characters made you travel, even after writing them, to Europe to sort of like traverse that path that they had taken as well, to try to figure out what their experience had been. And so I'm wondering if we're talking about silence, because these people never get to be grounded in home, to actually be anchored in home, how does that fracturing from the actual land of your birth and the land where the story may have started, because that's what's happening in the sea as well. They're running and then they're in this space and trapped there for a number of years. What does that mean when you are displaced, and how does that affect the story and silences?
Yes, great question. I didn't answer the one before, so I might just meld two answers together. Yeah, because I think actually they're really related in my head. I was thinking about what Santiago had said earlier about the reader, and I was thinking, it's true, I've been thinking a lot about the silence of the bookshelf, and how each reader faces it and lends their ear to it, that it's like a piece of music that doesn't play until that listener lends their senses to it. And I think when I was writing this place, the sea, I think for me the most transgressive thing was to say that this 14-year-old girl who's been displaced from her home in China is going to tell you the story of Hannah Arendt and Spinoza and Du Fu, the transgression of who might be the one to carry on a story that one might not have imagined her as the inheritor.
Yeah.
And I think when it comes to silence, I really wanted to push what it might mean to hear it in a different way. I remember years ago I wrote a piece about silence, and I had found this sort of beautiful note about how there are many languages for which the word silence doesn't exist. The idea of absolute silence. It's actually not something that actually exists. But in fact, it's just about the many different ways we could hear and the many senses through which we hear, even when it is not audible to the ear. And I think maybe some of what we're doing as we're making these stories is to try to push against what it is possible to perceive, even with the senses that we think we know how they work.
That's lovely.
Did I miss your question?
No, you're just intriguing me further. And I love that you mentioned what does it mean to have this girl carry on a story that really may not have been in her inheritance, because you talked about before in another interview, Hannah, not really, her talking about different wars around the world and never speaking to what's going on in Asia. And so it feeling like this was actually really resonant to her, but somehow bypassing her, marginalizing her completely. And so what does it mean to take on that story as well?
Just add something small. Yeah, I was interested in a figure who might not recognize the girl who's telling this story, but the girl has found recognition, even if it's in some ways a one-way path. And I just wanted to add one more thing thinking about that, because I've been thinking about silence a lot. And have been working on a piece about a long poem by the Palestinian poet Mahmoud Darwish. And it's a line that I keep thinking about, where he says, "One day I will be what I want to be. I will be a thought that no sword nor any book can carry to the wasteland."
Oh my. Yeah. Wow.
It is strange to think of a book carrying things to the wasteland, but it's something I feel that we're all thinking about in different ways.
Yeah. I think that speaks to a lot of what's happening contemporarily, right? Where people's stories are being disappeared, people are being disappeared. And how do you maintain selfhood and integrity and that sense of authenticity and your story and all that it means ancestrally, and how does that exist outside of the way that some people might frame it in a narrative? Yeah. And not able to be diminished by any construction of a wasteland. Yeah, because when we think about silence, and that's why I started off with the macro and the micro, right? We've all undergone silences, but there is a cultural, societal silencing that's happening contemporarily, right? Yeah. And how do we refute that? How do we write in protest against that? And why it's absolutely essential right now, as we are in the midst of fascism. But yeah, quite timely. All right. Do you want to speak to that sense of dislocation and displacement and disinheritance, and how that erects silence in works, and how you're refuting that, or negating it, rather? Yeah.
Well, when I started writing this book, I immediately thought that there was something complicated, because the story of my grandfather is that he was very far away. It was 12,000 kilometers from where the main thing that happened to his life happened. No, it was his mother being in the ghetto in Warsaw, and he was in Buenos Aires since 1928. So he was missing the main fact of his life. And well, quickly I understood that there was something like that in my life, because I left Argentina and Uruguay, where I live also, when I was 12. So in the 70s, so in a moment very complicated politically. And so I was missing what could have been the main fact of my life. And at the same time, I thought that I wrote a lot about the fact that when I arrived in France, because I was a very silent child, I always said that I had to learn not to speak in another language. And I did. I mean, I know how to be silent in French now too. In Spanish, French, in English, it's more complicated. That's what you hear my voice. So I have to find a voice that will allow me to speak about the fact that my grandfather, who was so far away from Holocaust, became silent, and why me, being only the grandson of a guy who was so far away from the Holocaust, can say that there is something from there, from such a big thing in human history, that will be part of my silence too. So I think you have to go very far away from yourself to speak about yourself.
Yeah.
So you have to make these kind of circles. You know that you will never find the center. There is no center. It's an illusion. But you have to go far away to come back and to say, well, maybe this is my land. I don't know if I will be able to live there, if I will be able to share it with other people through writing. But I know being so far away makes me feel something real about the place I am.
You don't think you could have written it home?
Sorry?
You couldn't have written it home?
I think after one exile, you don't have any home. It's finished, the idea of home. But you have to build it with something else than land. So you build it with language. So writing is trying to get something that I can call home. I think we all share one home, and that home is childhood. We are all exiled from that place. So we can maybe build something, starting with that thought. But no, I don't think there are other, how do you call it, patrie?
Homelands.
Homeland. There is no other homeland than language and childhood, I think. The rest is illusions.
Really?
Really.
Can I ask then, why do you say that you having to write in another language is like a measure of betrayal, the same that your grandfather underwent?
You have to repeat that.
Oh, sorry. You said in a quote somewhere that you having, because you had to leave, like exiled further, right, by the Dirty War, that having to write in France was some measure of betrayal. Similar, so akin to like your grandfather having left Poland and that being a betrayal, although it's a forcible exile and he left his mother there and all of that. And so you're creating this sort of like similarity. Then if you believe, if I'm getting it right, that there has to be distance in order to return, even cerebrally, to reflect upon that space that you're leaving, so you can write into that silence, then why term it a betrayal?
Because, you are always far away from the true place you should be.
Yeah.
Even when you write, when you write poetry, what you felt that makes you write a poem is already finished. And the moment when you write it, it's not the real feeling of, the wind speaking to you or the beauty of a person or the beauty of a landscape.
Yeah.
You feel that, and then you have to build with the distance. Okay. And in the language, we keep on doing that. Mm-hmm. That's why maybe silence is a great part of language, because it's maybe the place where there is no distance, but you obviously can't share that silence. So.
That makes sense, yeah. Beautifully said. Jonas?
Yeah, so thank you for inviting Mahmoud Darwish to this room. I thought it was beautiful to hear you say his words, but also to notice how silent we were afterwards. Like, we heard that, and we all thought about what those words mean. And we also felt that there were a lot of things we can't say right now. And I feel that kind of physically, because I'm here. I'm in the US on a temporary visa as a sole breadwinner for my family. And when I was living in Europe, I was always speaking. Mm-hmm. I was never silent. So I've been very, very silent lately. And then sometimes I wonder what it does to me, what it does to my soul. Politically silent. But then we can think maybe that's, I'm not going to say that it's good, but it's, maybe you can funnel all of those things into your fiction and hide it there, because they don't read books.
Very true.
So that's one opportunity, at least fiction. Yeah, I should say fiction. I'm a novelist. So, the last time I was in this room was to hear Salman Rushdie speak. And he has spoken eloquently about what it's like to leave a place and go to a new place. And he says that he was born in India, he went to the UK, now he's here in New York. He says that everyone that goes through a major transition in life, they have a previous part of you, a silent part of you that walks around in that old place.
Yes.
So he talked beautifully about the Bombay version of Salman and the UK version. And I have a Swedish version of Jonas, who is walking around right now in Stockholm. He's miserable. I'm very, very happy to be here. But I also have that experience of having left something and someone behind. And it also creates a reoccurring thought of did I mess this up? Every time I get on the Q train, I'm like, did I mess this up? What am I doing here? But I also love it. So that's the complicating thing, right? I know that we're running out of time, but I want you to leave. I don't want to leave you with this terrible Swedish saying that says silence is better than that silence is better than speaking. So I want to leave you with another quote by Zora Neale Hurston that I love, that I had on my wall in my office when I was working in Stockholm. It's the quote, if you're silent about your pain, they will kill you and say you enjoyed it.
Quite so.
That's a good motivator, to not stay silent.
Yay. So we are running out of time, and I'm going to do a 30-second. Is that okay? I'm going to ask 30 seconds, absolutely, what do you want to leave your audience with? What is the thesis of your book? What do you feel like, if you couldn't say another word, if you were silent hereafter, God forbid, knock on wood, that you had to get out and say right now? Last round.
Every single choice matters. There is no inconsequential action.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I will keep silent.
Organic, all right.
Well, maybe that's, silence is not an option.
Wow. And I would say you absolutely have to tell the truth. There are people depending on you, and that's not just right now. There are people in your past, your ancestors, there are people who are coming, there are people in your culture that require that truth, and that is part of resistance. And we have survived as a Trinidadian woman, as a person from the African diaspora, from telling in different means, and we have to do that regardless of what's happening. We have to tell. So with that, thank you very much for joining us.